Alright, this short video is going to go over what an oligopoly is, how we can get to it, and some examples about it. So an oligopoly is basically a firm inside an oligopolistic market. And an oligopolistic market has the following characteristics. It needs to have a small number of firms, so maybe anywhere from 2 to 10, depending on how they behave. If you have one firm, you're a monopoly, and if you have too many firms, you could get into monopolistic competition or perfectly competitive markets. So you need to have a small number. There need to be significant barriers to entry, because if there were no barriers of entry into the market, then firms could enter and it could become monopolistically competitive or perfectly competitive, what have you. And another key trait of an oligopolistic market is that firms have dependent behavior, meaning that if one firm decides to raise or lower their price, the other firm is going to change their price or decision making as well. So they have to consider what the other firms are going to do when they make their decision. And this characteristic is unique to an oligopolistic market, because in a perfectly competitive market, they're price takers. And monopolistically competitive, you're worried about your own product through advertising or research or brand development. And in a monopoly, you're the only one producing it, so you don't have to worry about it. So what can lead to an oligopolistic market? The small number of firms and barriers to entry? Well, there's two types of barriers: natural and legal. A legal barrier is just the government either making laws or issuing permits that say there can only be a select number of firms. An example of a legal monopoly might be an electricity company, where the government will only allow one power plant or one power company in an area. Also, trash collection is another example of a legal oligopolistic market, because the cities don't want to have 20,000 different trash collection companies. That just wouldn't make sense. Now, for a natural oligopoly, it means that firms can take advantage of economies to scale to minimize their average total cost to get to the whole demand curve. So it makes sense to only have a few firms, because they can take advantage of economies of scale to result in lower prices to satisfy the whole market demand. So the example I have here shows 3 firms and 3 average total cost lines. 1 represents one firm, 2 is the second firm, 3 is the third firm. And if you notice, this D here is the whole market. 3 firms, each producing at the minimum of their average total cost, will satisfy the whole market demand. So if we were to add in another firm, they couldn't produce at their minimum average total cost anymore. They would be producing somewhere higher than their minimum, and that would result in a higher market price. So a natural oligopolistic market can take advantage of these economies of scale, can get to the minimum point of their average total cost, and it only takes 3 firms. So that's what it looks like graphically. What are some examples? Well, the computer chip manufacturers. We have Intel, and the other one not coming to my brain right now, but there are only 2 firms, and the reason for that is because it takes so much money to build the factories, to build the machines, to get all that together to make these products. So having only 2 firms take advantage of their economies of scale will result in a lower price. Another one could be car manufacturing. Again, it takes so much money to build that factory, to get those inputs and other things, that it makes sense to only have a few firms in the industry. Finally, with dependent behavior, that leads to game theory. So it's how the firms interact with each other. And if the firms collude, which means they get together and discuss their actions, they say, look, I'll charge this price, you can also charge this price, and if we both charge the price, the consumer will have to pay it. However, if one firm charges a high price and the other charges the low price firm gets all of the business. So if they both meet and decide to charge the high price, they collude and they're acting as a monopoly. So you can see here with this graph, it's identical to our monopoly graph. If they collude, they produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We can draw that line up to the demand curve and we get a monopoly price. So that's the highest price you'll see in an oligopolistic market. It's when the firms collude. However, if the firms don't collude and they compete, they're going to continue to drop their price to try to gain more market share. So one firm will lower its price a little bit. The other firm, not wanting to lose market share, will also lower its price. And they'll continue to do this. And quantity demanded will continue to increase until we get to the point where marginal cost equals demand. And at this point, our price would be the same as the perfectly competitive outcome. So the highest it can possibly be is the monopoly outcome. The lowest it can possibly be is the perfectly competitive outcome. And likewise, we have the low quantity with the monopoly and the high quantity with the perfectly competitive market. The oligopolistic market can be anywhere in between or at the extreme of these 2 points. That, in addition to the game theory and the opportunity to collude, is what makes an oligopoly or oligopolistic markets so interesting.